and caught the red-hot light of the North Star. She opened the earth, walking with blood soaked.
Welcome back, and thank you all so much for joining me. Donald Trump has submitted a so-called 20-point plan to end the war in Gaza. Is it a balanced and equitable plan that results in true democracy and sovereignty for the Palestinian people? Or is it more of a cover, a sham that ensures the Zionist objective of occupation, capitulation, and the extermination of the Palestinian people? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. With each show, my guests and I provide insight and analysis into current events and the broader historical context in which most of these events take place. I want to quickly look at a couple of the headlines. The U.S. in, quote, armed conflict, end quote, with drug cartels, Trump tells Congress. The administration is seeking legal justification for strikes on what it has claimed are Venezuelan drug traffickers at sea. Some lawmakers and experts have said the notification is a dubious legal justification for what have been unlawful military strikes on alleged civilian criminals in the Western Hemisphere, a far, far cry from combatants engaged in direct battle with American forces. Folks, by any definition, this is murder. These are war crimes. These are crimes against humanity and should be treated as such. How can the administration claim that drug cartels are involved when due process has not been provided and the so-called targets have been summarily executed and rest at the bottom of the ocean? Venezuela condemns act of piracy as Israeli settler entity seizes Sumund flotilla. The International Global Sumund Flotilla, a convoy of 45 vessels carrying humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip in Palestine, has been assaulted by the Navy of the Israeli settler entity in international waters in the Eastern Mediterranean. This is from the Orinoco Tribune. As Zionist forces boarded the vessel this past Wednesday, live broadcasts from the flotilla shared images of the assault globally. Viewers saw the broadcast silenced after another, silenced one after another as the regime forces took control. Folks, can the Palestinians or anyone in the world trust Trump's so-called 20-point peace plan when the occupying force will not allow aid to starving and dying children and detains those who are peacefully trying to deliver it? On today's episode, the issue before us is Trump's so-called 20-point peace plan for Gaza. My guest has written a piece entitled Trump, quote, peace plan, end quote, a cynical cover to continue campaign of Palestinian extermination. And it opens with The psychopathology of the white supremacist colonial mindset renders colonial policymakers operating within that framework incapable of apprehending reality from the standpoint of the colonized. My guest is an editor and contributing columnist for the Black Agenda Report. He is the director of the North-South Project for People or Peoples-Centered Human Rights and serves on the executive committee of the U.S. Peace Council and leadership body of the U.S.-based United National Anti-War Coalition, UNAC. He is Ajamu Baraka. As always, my brother, welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
You write, the belief in a Gaza, quote, paradise, end quote, for the rich and famous, once Palestinians are paid to leave, or the idea that after over 700 days of a war of extermination, where continued survival is, Palestinians would then surrender, can only be believed by individuals completely afflicted with this psychopathology. Ajamu Baraka.
Of course, the Palestinian people have paid a price in blood and death and destruction in order to maintain the integrity of their project, to remain on the land of their ancestors. And therefore, they're not going to lightly give that up after these significant sacrifices. But the white supremacist colonial mindset is unable to understand that. They believe that everybody is open to the shakedown, that everybody is corruptible, that all you have to do is find the right price and you can cut a deal, as Donald Trump might frame it. But what we see with the Palestinian people are people that have made the supreme sacrifice to maintain some degree of integrity. And therefore, what we see with this so-called peace plan is just an opportunity on the part of the Trump administration and Benjamin Netanyahu to provide a justification for the continuation of their project, their objectives. And what are those objectives? It is basically to take advantage of what they see as a historic opportunity to complete the final solution for Palestinians. And what is that solution? To basically complete the process of genocide, of ethnic cleansing. They want the land. And it's important that people be reminded that what we are talking about are a people, an occupied people, a colonized people in Gaza, in the so-called West Bank, and in Israel proper, if you will, where 20% of that population is made up of Palestinians. The Israeli colonialists, they want the land in the same way that the colonialists in the United States of America wanted the land of North America. And they shot and they murdered and they tortured their way from one shiny sea to the other. And that territorial conquest became the United States of America. The Israelis want the same for their greater Israeli project. The only impediment to that is the continued existence of the Palestinian population. That's why people have to understand that for the Palestinians, the very fact that they can still survive, the very fact that they have not been murdered, is in fact an act of resistance. That's why it's been difficult for the Israelis to clean out, if you will, all of the Palestinians from Gaza City, because the Palestinians have said, we are tired of running. There's no place to go. If we're going to die, we would die here on our land. So the Israelis and the U.S. understand the price that they have to extract from the Palestinians, which is basically genocide. But they need a justification, and this phony peace plan is, in fact, that justification. When, and I'm quite sure this will happen, when the Palestinian resistance rejects the plan, because the plan calls for their complete surrender then as Donald Trump said, uh, the Israelis will be given a green light to finish the project, to apply the final solution.
You know, there are two words that are, for me anyway, conspicuously absent in this so-called peace plan. One word is democracy, and the other word is sovereignty. When you look at, for example, uh, paragraph 9, Gaza will be governed under the temporary transitional governance of a technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public services and municipalities for the people in Gaza. This committee will be made up of qualified Palestinians and international experts with oversight and supervision by a new international transitional body, blah, 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 blah. In the international context, and you know a whole lot more about this than I do, but sovereignty is the key. And I don't see anything in here about sovereignty for a Palestinian state.
Because it doesn't exist. It's not part of this particular plan. This plan, in fact, severs the situation in Gaza from the broader question around Palestinian independence, Palestinian nationhood, indeed Palestinian sovereignty. This is a plan that is meant to, again, provide the justification for the continuation of the clearance of the Palestinian people from Gaza. So no, there's no question of this being some kind of plan leading toward a solution, be it a two-state solution or one-state solution or whatever. There's no question about what is the plight of Palestinians on the West Bank. There's no question around what will be the shape of a Palestinian state, because that's not even part of the equation. This is mainly a plan that will allow for the Israelis to complete their project. And once they are able to clear enough Palestinians from the territory, then this plan reflects how that territory will be governed. They're going to bring in some Tom Arabs who will be part of a governing structure and a security apparatus. They have is going to be initially something called a board of peace, where the chairpersons of that board of peace will be no other than Donald P. Trump or Donald J. Trump, and the ex UK Prime Minister, what's his name?
Tony Blair.
Tony Blair. Okay, there's no. So here you have these European powers believing that they can determine the structure of a governance process for Palestinian people. There's no input from the Palestinian people. In fact, the idea of bringing in the Palestinian Authority is an idea that's in the plan, but Benjamin Netanyahu has made it quite clear that they don't see that happening, because if you bring in the Palestinian Authority, Dr. Leon, and with the move toward recognizing a so-called Palestinian state, even though one doesn't exist yet on the ground, it provides some legal complications, especially when we remind ourselves that if the Palestinian Authority is recognized as, in fact, the representative of the Palestinian people, then the question around who owns the tremendous amount of gas right off the coast of Gaza, a gas deposit that right now is being controlled or claimed by Israel. So this is all about big money from this insane concept of a Gaza paradise, a Riviera on the Mediterranean, to an understanding of the economic importance of controlling the Gaza Strip because of the gas and oil off the coast. This is all about big money. This is why the Israeli capitalists want that land. So no, there's no conversation here around Palestinian sovereignty because there's no will toward that in the United States or definitely not in Israel.
In fact, let's do this. There's some video of Donald Trump talking about his beautiful board of peace. Let's roll some of that video. So, Ajamu, when the president in this foolishness, he was basically saying he was begged to head this. I don't want to do it. I've got a lot of things to do, and these people love me. The in fact, the one element of this is even called, I think, in the plan. I'm trying to pull it up here quickly. It's called the Trump Trump economic development plan to rebuild and energize Gaza. If leaders in the Middle East and Europe welcome Trump's Gaza peace plan, as soon as he puts his name on it, then that should be a signal to everybody that once again, as a self-proclaimed developer, this is a land grab.
Exactly. That's his orientation. The interests of the people are secondary. They're not even part of the equation. And that's what people need to understand, that this is a cynical move on the part of the Trump administration, and it should be opposed. The fact that there are some states that have signed on to this to provide some support, including a number of the vassal Arab states, is just another reflection of how politically and morally corrupt those states are. So this is a recipe for disaster. It is a cynical attempt to manipulate public opinion, primarily in the U.S., because most people throughout the world, in particular in the global South, they understand this to be what it is. It is basically a land grab, and the only element that is there to put a break on that is a continued existence of the Palestinian people. So everybody who is clear oppose this, and that's why you see that there's been an uptick in political opposition throughout the world, demonstrations in various capitals, including national strikes in Italy and national strikes that are breaking out in places like France, all in solidarity with the Palestinian people. Because one of the consequences of this war, Dr. Leon, is that people have finally been exposed to the brutal reality of the Israeli colonial project. As I've said over and over again, when I went to the occupied territories in 2014, I knew that if people ever were exposed to the reality of that occupation, the degradation that is melded out to Palestinians on a daily basis, if they understood and were exposed to the attitudes of many of the Israelis who were straight up fascists and racist, that the support, the blind support given to this project, this Israeli colonial project, would evaporate rapidly. I said it at that time overnight. But we're seeing now that happening, that basically, even in the US, polls have now come out that have suggested for the first time in post-independence history, if you will, of Israel, a majority of the U.S. population no longer supports the Israeli project. So they have lost the U.S. In the same way, or almost in a more, just a significant way, as Israel has lost the support of the entire world.
One of the elements of this that I know is incredibly important to displaced Palestinians is the right of return. And that's not addressed. And I don't say that as though I'm surprised that it's not, but I think that as we were at the beginning of the conversation talking about a number of fallacies or a number of things that that are missing from this conversation, the right of return is one of those things.
Of course, I mean, the question or the issue of the right of return, and when we are referencing the right of return, of course, we want people to understand that this is a long-standing demand of Palestinians who found themselves displaced from their own lands beginning in 1947, and then, of course, that process was completed in 1948 with the establishment of the Israeli state. Some almost 800,000 Palestinians were forced to flee their lands, and they ended up in refugee camps across West Asia and throughout the entire world. Under international law, when there's a resolution of this kind of displacement, the right to return is a centering principle of that reconciliation process. And so Palestinians have been making an argument since 1948. If there's any resolution, if there's any settlement of this historic crime, that at the center of that must be the right to return. You know, it's interesting, Dr. Leon, that when I was there in 2014, one of our guides they took us over to West Jerusalem, and they were pointing out where people who they knew their homes were still there, of course,
Mm-hmm.
and that one of the reasons why the Israeli authorities were so adamant in controlling visitation of Palestinians to West Jerusalem and other parts of Israel proper, if you will, was because Palestinians, many of them still wear around their neck the keys to their homes.
Mm-hmm.
They're still there, Dr. Leon, but
Mm-hmm.
now occupied by Israeli settlers. And there's all kinds of images of people at certain points who were able to get there, going up to their homes and actually even talking to
Mm-hmm.
the settlers who are now occupying their homes. So this historic crime has to be dealt with, and there's a consistent demand being made by the Palestinians. But again, these are some of the things that are supposed to be addressed when you are moving toward a and finalizing a process where there's supposed to be a solution to this Palestinian-Israeli issue. But again, this process here, this so-called peace plan, nothing like that's on the table because it's not a serious plan to address the root causes of the conflict, the assault on the part of the Israeli occupation forces on the Palestinians. There's nothing serious about this at all. So no, all of those kinds of issues in terms of a right to return, the borders of a Palestinian state, those kinds of questions would be questions that would be seriously addressed if there was in fact a serious attempt to address the issue of Palestinian displacement. But that's not the case here.
I have friends here that are Palestinian, and one of them told me a similar story to what you've just recounted, and that is that he was away at college when his village was taken over by the government. His family was forced to leave their home. He was not able to return from school back to his home, but his parents stayed in the area. His mother, after a number of years, uh, got up the guts to go and knock on their door of their home And when the settlers opened the door, his mother asked if she could come into the house. And she was allowed into the house and saw in their kitchen their pots were on the stove and their plates were on the table. This is so. I've been told similar stories by friends of mine who live here. You know, you mentioned one of the elements of this, and Donald Trump loves to talk about the hostages, the hostages, the hostages. Item number 5. Once all hostages are, I'm sorry. Item number 4. Within 72 hours of Israel publicly accepting this agreement, all hostages, alive and deceased, will be returned. Then item 5. Once all hostages are released, Israel's going to release some Palestinians. Item number 6. Once all hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. So you know what? So let me get to this point first. Amnesty they will be given amnesty by whom and for what? Because opposition to occupation is actually a protected right by international law. So who's going to grant this amnesty, and what is the amnesty being granted for?
Precisely.
Is that a sensible question to ask?
That's a very precise question, because these are the items that demonstrate how irrational, how unproductive that this plan really is. This is the meat of the issue. That basically this illegal settler regime has taken upon itself to make declarations as to not only who will be allowed to stay in the Gaza Strip, but also their political representation, and who and what kind of consequence will be melted out to Palestinians that resisted the occupation. These are the positions of the victor, but it has nothing to do with legality. It certainly has nothing to do with morality. So no, they have no legitimate claims to be in a position to make those kind of determinations. And you are right that resistance to colonial occupation is a recognized collective human right. But the real point here is this. This is why I think this is such a cynical plan. The demand in those points are for the Palestinian resistance to basically surrender, and to trust that even if they surrender, that the Israelis would abide by the agreement and allow them to be dispatched to other parts of the world. Where is the evidence for having any kind of confidence in the Israelis upholding their side of any agreement? We've seen that every agreement that they have made with the Palestinian resistance, they have violated, including during this last phase of so-called negotiations, where they lured the Palestinians negotiators to a spot where they had set up basically an ambush to murder them. So there's no confidence that the Israelis or the United States, for that matter, can be held by its word. And so, on those bases, it would be very difficult for the resistance to agree to this. And have gotten reports that the resistance forces on the ground in Gaza have expressed their opposition to any kind of agreement of that kind. So, and I know it's difficult for people to understand how can people who have basically been reduced to living in rubble, who are fighting a guerrilla warfare with handmade weapons, because of course you can't get resupplied like the Israelis have been resupplied by the United States, who are being subjected to the most horrific bombings and psychological harassment with the drones and systematic murder. How is it that their representatives, their military arm, their political representatives can suggest that they will continue to fight? Well, that's my point. You're never going to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to understand what it means to have dignity and be prepared to die for your personal and collective dignity. The colonial mentality is unable to grasp that. And that's why we can always count on these white supremacists to make mistakes, to undermine their own objectives, their own goals, because they can't understand the mentality of the people they're trying to oppress, and they can't understand their own limitations. Hmm.
You again, I was reading the sections regarding the hostages, and Trump, is always talking about the hostages. But what I think is very important for people to understand is, and I only know one way to say this, and that is Netanyahu doesn't give a damn about the hostages. And I know this because, and some people have heard of the Hannibal operational order, and we've been told that no such order exists, but Haaretz, a liberal uh, uh, Jewish newspaper, has a piece. IDF ordered Hannibal directive on October 7th to prevent Hamas from taking soldiers captive. And so to summarize, well, quote, there was crazy hysteria and decisions started being made without verified information. Documents and testimonies obtained by Haaretz reveal the Hannibal operational order, which directs the use of force to prevent soldiers being taken into captivity, was employed at 3 Army facilities infiltrated by Hamas, potentially endangering civilians as well. So what they're saying is they'll do anything to prevent hostages from being taken, even taking the hostages out themselves.
Exactly.
And so all of this hand wringing and all of this, and I don't say this to demean or diminish the value of life, no matter on whose side of the fight you're on. What I'm saying is all of these crocodile tears regarding concern for the hostages, Netanyahu never has given a damn about the hostages, and that's evidence in this Hannibal operational order.
There's evidence in terms of what happened on October the 7th, is evidence in terms of the decision to continue the slaughter of Palestinians, and is evidence in the attempt to blow away the negotiators, thus providing the conditions in which it has been very difficult now for an agreement to be arrived at that would result in the release of the last of the captives. That's been a concern that the families of the captives have expressed throughout this entire episode. It is the basis of much of the opposition inside Israel itself, the anger that's been directed toward the Netanyahu government, that for many people it's quite clear that in order to realize their objective of finally being able to expand into a greater Israel by eliminating the Palestinians and the Gaza Strip, that they have sacrificed and were willing to sacrifice the lives of the captives. That's quite clear. It's not even it's controversial perhaps here in the West, in particular in the U.S., where the corporate media will not provide adequate coverage of these kinds of controversies that are taking place in Israel itself. Think about this, Dr. Leon. When's the last time you've seen images of massive demonstrations against the Netanyahu government in Israel? Every once in a while, you get a fleeting image. But for the evening news and most
Mhm.
of the major cable networks, you see nothing like that. You would think that the Netanyahu government, the right-wing government, that everybody in Israel, gives them their support. That's not the case. In fact, many people in Israel believe that this ongoing war has been the worst thing that ever happened to the Israeli state. Because look at the consequences. We talked a little bit earlier about the fact that they have lost the support of a majority of the population in the U.S., but they have lost the support of a majority of the population throughout the entire world. We even see a situation now, Dr. Leon, where the opposition to Zionism is now beginning to bleed into what one can only conclude are now becoming anti-Semitic kinds of acts in various parts of the world. Because in the Zionist quest to try to give itself legitimacy, it conflated Judaism with Zionism, which many people, many Jewish people will say is anti-Semitic in and of itself.
Correct.
It's like it's like reducing Christianity to the activities and the thought of these right-wing white nationalist Christians. There's a
Or
distortion of
or the Ku Klux
Christianity.
Klan, because the Ku Klux Klan claims to be a Christian organization.
Exactly, exactly. So the consequence has now been that people are now directing their anger at Jewish people, even Jewish people who could be anti-Zionist. So they have they have done the very thing that is the Zionists have done the very thing that they claimed they were trying to um, provide protection for, and that is the security and safety of Jewish people. They have now made being Jewish a very dangerous experience now for many people around the world, and it's really sad. But they created this themselves.
You mentioned, there's a to your point about um, Jews making the point, equating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. There's an American professor, Jason Stanley, who has left Yale University and has taken a position in Canada, because he feels threatened now as a Jew. He feels threatened here in the United States, and he was the first one I heard make the point that to conflate those two is in itself anti-Semitic. Jason Stanley was the first individual I heard make that comparison. They keep talking about this Riviera on the Mediterranean, that they want to create this wonderful vacation spot. Um, who in their right mind would actually go and stay at a space like this beyond the history? You're really just turning yourself into a target, because these folks ain't going anywhere, man. They,
Mm.
this, you can sign all the agreements you want, but this isn't over. And so all that would have to happen is one European vacationer gets shot, heaven forbid, one grenade gets thrown, heaven forbid, and you've just sunk your money into a dry well.
Dr. Leon, you're right, but it's never going to be built. That is impossible.
Right.
It is. There's not enough people who will be willing to sleep on the bones and bodies of Palestinians who would visit a Mediterranean Riviera as a consequence of what people around the world have now seen and witnessed. So it was a fantasy from the very beginning. But one of the other parts that is really sad that we have to also make people aware of, that no matter how this situation is resolved, and let's make sure we're clear, even if there is a ceasefire and a stop in the killing temporarily right now,
Mm-hmm.
as you had pointed out earlier, the broader issues, the deeper issues of Palestinian statehood have still not been addressed. But in the meantime, the consequences of this war will linger on. What do I mean by that? What we're seeing now, Dr. Leon, is what we're seeing and what we saw in places like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. We're seeing now the consequences of the war and its impact on human beings who weren't even born during the conflict. What we're now seeing are reports of Palestinian children who are being born with horrible birth defects
Mm-hmm.
because they are basically living in a toxic waste dump with all of the toxic chemicals from the various munitions, the dust and the dirt. It is a environmental wasteland, and they will be carrying this around with them for the rest of their lives and passing those contradictions on through their genes to other Palestinians. This is another example of the kind of criminality of these Western powers. And let me make a link, if I can, Dr. Leon.
Connect the dots, please.
This issue of there was a vote the other day in the United Nations on the issue of Haiti,
Mm-hmm.
where the Security Council gave coverage to another racist invasion that's taking place in Haiti. Under the pressure of the United States, they have now uh, created a situation where they're going to augment the Kenya security forces that were injected into Haiti to supposedly bring some kind of stability to Haiti to fight the gangs that they created. Now they are going to expand that force and bring in 5,500 troops. Many people believe that but the bulk of those troops, in fact, will be from the United States. This thing is being called a gang suppression force.
Mm-hmm.
The focus being on so-called gangs, and they are basically using their supposed concern for the Haitian people who are being terrorized and brutalized by the gangs in order to inject themselves into the life of Haiti. Now, you know, a rational person will ask a very simple question. If these are the same people who are backing a vicious racist genocide in Gaza, can we believe that they are concerned about Black people in Haiti? And the obvious answer is no, they're not. So then we have to ask the question, well, why are they in Haiti? What is their real objectives in Haiti? And should we be opposed to that? Because we know that wherever the United States of America goes, supposedly on behalf of the people, the only thing that really are advancing are the interests of the capitalist 1%. So, we got to connect the dots. These are the same people who are not only going into Haiti, but the same political forces that are threatening to invade and occupy Black-led cities across the United States of America. Are they doing that on our behalf? Or is this a consistent thread here? A consistent thread of white supremacy, of using force and violence in order to maintain and expand white supremacy. And if that is in fact the case, what should we be doing? What should we be preparing in order to resist this war that's being declared on us? And Trump was quite explicit.
Yes, he was.
He declared war.
Yes.
He said, you all will understand in Chicago why we are now calling this the Department of War.
Mm-hmm.
He said the other day that as he talked to the U.S. military, that the administration and indeed the government needs to be concerned about the quote unquote enemy within.
Mm-hmm.
Who is that enemy? Was he just talking about the so-called migrants? Of course not. Not if he's going into these other cities that are controlled by, theoretically, by black people. So here we have these kinds of developments taking place. And so what we have to understand then, and understand in a new kind of way, is that all of these issues are connected. We can't lay back and say, "Oh, what's happening in Palestine has nothing to do with me." The fact that Trump characterizes the migrants as thugs and criminals and psychopaths, but that has nothing to do with me. As a matter of fact, I might even agree with him. But guess what? Now they're moving back to their traditional enemies, us. Okay. So we say all that to say this, Dr. Leon, that this is a precarious moment. And people have to understand what we're up against. There's no other moment like this that I can identify in U.S. history, even post Civil War, and even post Reconstruction, beginning in 1877. This is what's the difference? Even in 1877, they still needed our labor. With the technological developments taking place right now, our people, and the majority of our people are working class people. We're becoming economically superfluous, redundant. That is a recipe for genocide. Okay. Last week, the ICE military forces, and they are military forces, surrounded a building in Chicago, a building made up of migrants, people who supposedly were undocumented, and they went door to door, snatching whole families out of their apartments, questioning people, detaining people. Now
Came
you can
in
say,
with
"Oh well,"
came in with Black Hawk helicopters and
and
repelled.
you can say, "Oh, exactly." You can say, "Well, those are the immigrants. Undocumented. You got nothing to do with us. They are coming towards you." If you allow that kind of systematic violation of the rights of human beings, basically you are feeding into and you're conditioning an environment that will make it dangerous for all of us.
A couple of things. One, you talk about uh, are becoming as Mr. Samuel Yet wrote in The Choice, we have become obsolete people. And I think Sidney Wilhelm wrote the book Who Needs the Negro, talking about with advancements in technology, again, going back to Samuel Yet, we have become obsolete people. You asked why the focus on Haiti. And one of the things that you mentioned, and I've got three reasons to start off. If this were a show on Haiti, it would start off with one, labor. As we're losing access to the Chinese labor force, we need labor, and so Haiti would be a very cheap source of labor. Two would have to be a naval base. The United States wants to build a naval base there as it looks eastward towards China. Um, that would be a naval base. And three, there are geological surveys that show there could very well be more oil and natural gas off the coast of Haiti than there is in Venezuela. So those are three things for people to think about. You mentioned the Israel blowing up the negotiators, and it's also important to remember that the United States assassinated General Qasem Soleimani as he was on a diplomatic mission under the pretext of developing rapprochement between the Saudis and Iran, and the United States pushed the button on him. So I just needed to make the point that
And it's important to point out he thought he was under the protection of the United States.
There you go. Hence, Henry Kissinger saying, dangerous to be an American ally. Deadly to be in a I'm not
American
dangerous.
friend,
Dangerous to be an American enemy.
enemy.
Deadly to be an American ally.
Exactly. These are
Man.
some treacherous forces, Dr. Leon. And I think unfortunately for the U.S., the gig is up. People understand that. Even naive elements like the Russians and even the Chinese are beginning to understand that you're not dealing with rational forces. The Iranians understand that also quite painfully. But we've got to figure out how do we put a break on this madness? Because I make the argument that as long as the U.S. has this disproportionate force, this disproportionate power, they represent an existential threat to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
We see the kind of insanity now unfolding with Ukraine, and the pivot that the Trump administration has made on this insane war that was engineered by the Biden administration.
Wait a minute. To that
These are,
point, let me to that point. Let me just quickly ask you:
yeah.
do you see the focus on Venezuela is that the pivot away from Ukraine, as now Trump sees that dog can't hunt, that dog won't even come off the porch, that war was lost a long time ago, so now they need to create new conflict? So has Venezuela become the next one in line?
It's the next one in line, but not because they are making a pivot away from
Okay.
Ukraine necessarily.
Okay.
This is part of their strategy of regional dominance
Okay.
under their full spectrum
Full spectrum dominance.
dominance doctrine. That basically they understand that as things are becoming more and more unmanageable in the Americas, because the contradictions are not cannot be reconciled, that the force and violence and political suppression has to be the order of the day, and so they can't allow for Venezuela to continue to exist in its present form. So they're using this pretense of Venezuela being involved, some kind of it's a war on crime project, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
in order to justify making strikes on the Venezuelan revolutionary process. So yes, it's on the table, and it's something we've got to be very, very aware of. Even before Venezuela, though, Dr. Leon, we've got to watch very closely because many people are predicting, and I'm one of them, that the time is right for them to restrike Iran. It's
Oh
not
yeah.
over in Iran.
Yes.
And so,
So they think.
because they
So
know that the Iranian air defense systems are only about 65% up to
Mhm.
effectiveness. If you're going to strike, you got to strike now. And so we got to watch that too. Look, this whole world is a dangerous place because we have maniacs who are now
Mhm.
running things in the West. And they represent this threat to all of us. If one does not take an anti-war posture, if one doesn't understand the connection between being anti-war and the absolute necessity to being anti-imperialist, then basically you are perpetuating confusion and ignorance. These people are fighting to maintain their dominance,
Mhm.
to maintain their ability to exploit and oppress all the rest of us. And we've got to understand the terms of struggle today. That if we don't recognize who the existential threat is, who the enemy is, that basically we are going to be in big trouble. We're already in big trouble because basically all of us are being targeted, including our organization and others in this country, in the United States. That anybody who opposes the fascist agenda are now being targeted. In fact, the Trump administration has made anti-fascism a domestic terrorist category. What is this? No such thing as Antifa. There's no
No.
organization called that. It's anti-fascist. So to be an anti-fascist today in a fascist society is to be a criminal. Very, very dangerous.
People need to understand, to your point, you can't dial 411 and ask the operator, give me the phone number and address of the Antifa organization in Cleveland. um
Right.
It's not next to the Domino's. It's not next to Pizza Hut. It doesn't exist. It's an ideology. And so final point, final dot to connect here as we get out. And because, when I heard Macron talk about recognizing a Palestinian state and that he was working this through the Palestine Authority and Mahmoud Abbas, I knew the jig was up. I knew the idea was phony because Abbas doesn't represent Abbas. He doesn't represent anybody. He's considered an outcast by the Palestinians. And you made mention of that earlier in this conversation. And that just made me think about when President Obama put Bill Clinton and George Bush over the Haiti rebuild. And that insulted Haitians to no end because both Clinton and Bush had been in their administrations, had been involved in Grand Theft Haiti. And so that just connecting dots, that just made me think about that.
And to continue with the connecting that dot too, going back to Haiti, people have to understand Haiti's been under occupation now for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that the Haitian people, they want their independence. And that was the demands that were being made in the streets in 2021 and going into 2022. But the Biden administration, they wouldn't heed the call for democracy. In fact, they continue to provide support to a president that was no longer seen as credible or legitimate. And then they brought in the guns and propped up these gangs in order to provide the chaos to allow for the justification for continued and more aggressive military intervention. So this is the story of imperialism. A story we've got to change. If we're able to survive.
Brother Ajamu Baraka, thank you so much. The piece, folks, is entitled Trump Peace Plan, a cynical cover to continue campaign of Palestinian extermination. Trump Peace Plan, a cynical cover to continue campaign of Palestinian extermination. You can find it at Black Agenda Report. The author, my guest, Brother Ajamu Baraka. It just came out Tuesday.
Wednesday.
Thank you so much. Wednesday. Thank you so much. Greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate your time. And as always, look forward to having you back.
Thank you so much.
Folks, thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. New episodes every week. Stay tuned. We'll work out who the guests next week are going to be. But trust me, as the Moon Man would say, it's going to be a big one. Follow us on social media. All the links are below in the show description. Remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. Why? Because it's rhetoric free. See y'all next week. Have a wonderful, blessed weekend. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.